So I'm back from visiting around Malta's capital, and a funny thing happened while I was out. I was checking Facebook as I do, and I noticed somebody post that Amazon giveaways are actually shutting down. So I crossed this out, or I put it up in red up here. So all that stuff I talked about before with Amazon giveaways, it seems like Amazon is now sending out a notice that they're going to shut down Amazon giveaways as of, I think, October 10th. 2019. So that's kind of interesting. It kind of is a good example. Amazon changes all the time. You really need to be paying attention or in some of the Facebook groups so that you can be getting up-to-date information. Because even if you think you have everything figured out and you have a really nice launch plan, the details change all the time. So the nice thing about being an indie author or an indie publisher, once you have the content, you can adapt and you can, repackage or republish as long as you are flexible, which is also one of the nice things about self-publishing is if you want to throw up a new cover or change your blurb, you can do it really quickly without needing anyone's approval. Whereas even if you sign up with a smaller press or a service that someone else is handling, your Amazon page or whatever, you're not going to have that kind of control. So with Amazon giveaways, let me say quickly, one thing that I will do, I still have a few weeks left. By the time you're watching this, it'll probably be too late, but I will take advantage of the Amazon giveaways as long as I can. Let me also talk quickly about Goodreads. Goodreads is a social books platform that's mostly for readers, but is now owned by Amazon. So Goodreads used to have a book giveaway program. They still do it, but it's gotten kind of weird. So it still works okay for paperback books, but I don't recommend it for ebooks because what Goodreads has been doing is if you sign up and pay, I think it's $100 or something, you pay to give out 100 copies of your ebook, which sounds pretty good. And you can also, I didn't mention, but with Amazon giveaways, I could set up, like I could do a 99-cent deal and I could buy 50 copies of my own book and give them away to my audience. There was a time when that would actually boost the rank. I don't think that's the case anymore. But you can kind of do the same kind of thing with Goodreads, except what Goodreads has been doing is they have like one main account and they'll buy the books, those 100 books, they'll buy it for all the winners. But because there's all these different kinds of authors paying to promote their books with these book giveaways, it seriously screws up your also bot. So 100 sales, also bots tend to regenerate. So you would have to get like another couple hundred sales to wipe the slate clean. So if you do a giveaway with Goodreads and you give away 100 copies, if you don't sell many of your own book, then whatever your also bots end up, it's going to be like whoever else paid to advertise the same week on Goodreads, which is going to be a whole bunch of random books. Not all of them will be nice books or good books with good covers. So your also bots are going to show all this messy crap, which is not great. That's a severe disadvantage of their platform, which is why I don't recommend Goodreads giveaways. But that may be a new option. Since Amazon's shutting down their giveaways, I'm not exactly sure why, but most likely it's because Amazon, people who sell stuff on Amazon have probably been giving away free samples with Amazon giveaways to build a big following and get reviews. And Amazon has probably figured out that some not so scrupulous people are kind of hacking the system, or it's not reader friendly. It's not really helping their business. It's not really helping their buyers. So like I said earlier, Amazon's always going to take care of number one, which is its consumer. So for whatever reason, Amazon giveaways is going away. So a lot of what I mentioned earlier isn't the case anymore, but I'm going to move down to other things. Mostly we'll get into the launching stuff in this video. So I'm going to start with ad stacking, which just means there are a lot of promo sites. I mentioned Bookbub earlier. What there used to be was a bunch of little blogs that had built book promotion services because there wasn't, the problem with publishing in general is that there are literally millions of authors with unsuccessful books who are willing to pay for a promotion. And a lot of times they'll either pay like $5,000 or $10,000 for some kind of PR, which doesn't really work because old school stuff like a press release, for example, or getting a billboard in Times Square or getting on the radio or TV interview. That kind of stuff doesn't really work, but that's what authors still think they want. So they will pay a lot of money for it, even though it doesn't sell books. Or they're just going to buy a bunch of cheap promo stuff that doesn't work at all, but they figure, hey, it's $50, who cares? And this is stuff like Twitter blasts that reach 1 million people. You never really want to pay for a blast that reaches everybody, because you want to be really selective about who your book is reaching, so that it's reaching the right kind of people who are likely to be more interested in your actual offer. But that's why these promo sites work pretty well, is that a lot of them have genre specific email lists. So if I have an urban fantasy or a young adult or a thriller or horror or whatever, they've built a list of 50,000 or 100,000 readers who have opted in to hear about deals, and you can pay them and they will send out your book deal to that list. I mentioned deals a couple times because most of the promo sites, they want to feature deals rather than, a full price. So that's one of the reasons why you should launch with a 99-cent campaign or a free campaign, so that you can do this ad stacking technique, which just means you book all of the ads on all the promo sites. Especially recently, these kind of book blasts, they used to work really well. They don't really work so well anymore. And a lot of it is because they don't really curate the content. So the readers, they see a bunch of crap and they're less likely to open the emails. One of the exceptions is Bookbub, which has kind of come in and dominated the space, because unlike all the other ones that were mostly like small hobby sites, Bookbub was a really serious business that curates the content. So you have to apply for a Bookbub ad, and they're actually really hard to get. There are some things like if you're wide, it's easier to get them. Although I've taken books out of KU to try to get a Bookbub and it hasn't worked. One strategy that I heard of recently was you can actually apply for a Bookbub and say that you're wide. And if you get accepted, you can contact KU and ask them to cancel that 3-month exclusivity contract. They're pretty good about that. If you just say, I got this really big promotion, I would like to, it's not working out for me, I'm not happy with the results, I'd like to pull my book out of KU. As long as you ask for permission, they're usually pretty good about that. You just have to ask, because if you don't ask and you put your book wide, then they will kick you out of KU, I think for a year. I've actually been kicked out a couple of times. Amazon's really strict, and they will take action first. So I've had like my ability to review shut down. I've had my ability to run giveaways shut down. They've kicked me out of KU a couple times. They've also taken away my pre-orders a couple times, because if you, and this is something I'll talk more about later actually, but they just changed significantly some of their pre-order stuff. I'll talk more about that when I get down here. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but my point was Bookbub curates content, so you can apply, and if you have a bigger deal, like if you price your book high for a longer period of time, like $5.99 or $9.99, or if you have a box set, which is usually $9.99, and then you discount it, Bookbub is looking for the best deal for its readers, so it's more likely you'll get accepted for something like that. But it is hard to get, and you can't really count on having a Bookbub. Bookbub also has its own advertising campaign. David Gaughran has a good book about that, but it is difficult. I've found, and most people find, it's difficult to get Bookbub ads running well for you. And that just means with Bookbub ads, you can just pay and they'll show your ad at the bottom of their emails. You don't have to get accepted, but it's difficult to make that profitable. So it takes, if you're a numbers person or a numbers geek, if you stick with it, if you really learn how to do it, it can be really effective, but it's not as easy as some of the other platforms, which is why down there under advertising, I'm only going to talk about Facebook and AMS, which is advertising on Amazon. So Bookbub works great if you can get it, but you can't count on it because you have to apply. So the other thing that kind of still works is you can look at all the promo sites. In the Guerrilla Publishing workbook, I have a list of the most effective promo sites. There are several hundred. There are also some services that will submit your book to all the promo sites for you, which is kind of useful. The pain in the ass about ad stacking is that most of the promo sites have different timing requirements. So you might have to apply like 6 months in advance. 6 weeks in advance, or some of them 2 weeks in advance, because they only show like 3 books a day. And so you have to find open slot availability on the list that you want to market to, and you have to do it in advance. So you kind of have to plan this stuff out like a month or two in advance to make sure you do it all right. I haven't done this for a while, but that's one of the reasons I'm having trouble with my launch. Even though I've built a platform, even though I have a list, I tried to rely more on full price stuff, and I haven't done the free or the 99-cent promotions as much. And I think a lot of my readers, like I said, even with a free book, you still have to sell it. You still have to get them excited about it with a good blurb, a good description, good reviews. So I've kind of banked on the fact that my audience wants my books. And that hasn't worked out in the last launch. It is getting more competitive. Readers are on many different author lists. So just having a new release is not a big deal. They have, 10 new releases a day. They're swamped with books. There's so many books. So the relationship building is really important, but you should be also looking at ad stacking. Even if you're building your own platform and you're building your own email list, you should also be trying to do some kind of ad stacking for launch. And the basic reasoning for all of this is that you want to get as many sales as possible in the first week, especially of your launch. Amazon also likes to see an upwards trajectory, which means like day 1, you get 20 sales, and day 2, you get 30 sales, and day 3, you get 50 sales, like you sell more. So some people will do ad stacking where, they'll plan to book, 1 site, then 2 sites, then 3 sites, so that your sales are increasing and Amazon thinks, oh, this book is selling, we should start promoting it. Even if people follow you on Amazon, Amazon won't necessarily send out a new release email. What they tend to do is they send out very small batches. So they may send an email to like 100 people and see the conversion on your book. And if the conversion is pretty good, they might send it out to 200 people or 500 people. So you really have to go back. I haven't really mentioned yet, I've talked a lot about it in the other videos, but the cover, the blurb, the reviews, they are so important. If your main offer is not converting, this stuff really isn't going to work as well, which is again why if you have the opportunity to do some split testing before you launch. I know it's difficult if you're designing your own covers or if you're buying covers. You may not have the luxury of just testing out several covers, but it's a good idea at least to get feedback from a professional designer. You don't want to just ask for feedback on Facebook because, some people will give you honest advice, but some people will just say it looks great, especially friends and family will say it looks great, even if it's really terrible because they don't want to hurt your feelings. And there are dangers I mentioned last time of designing your own cover because you're less flexible. I'm actually relaunching a lot of my books recently. I'm going to redo the blurbs and the covers. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this a long time and I still can't get everything right the first time. So usually after you launch, the first month you might be kind of stressed out, but then later on, you don't want to be afraid of shaking things up or testing things. If you're not converting, if you can't get ads to work, there's a problem you can still fix, which is great because that means, there's room for improvement. It's not just, if your book isn't selling, it's not because your book isn't good necessarily. You wouldn't find that out until your book is selling. If you have the cover and the blurb and the reviews right, you can still sell the book. If people don't like it, then they won't review it or they'll leave you negative reviews. But that's all after the fact. Of course, you want a good book, but you can still sell a not good book as long as you get all the packaging and the positioning right. So the goal, like I said, of ad stacking is to sell a lot of copies quickly. I would shoot for 100 copies. Most authors never sell 100 copies of their book. And even if it's your first launch, I think 100 copies is great. But the trick is you don't just want to sell it to your friends and family because that will screw up your also bots. They won't really be the right readers. So it may even end up with some negative reviews where not only does Amazon not want to see reviews from your friends and family because that can kind of get your accounts or their accounts in trouble, but also you don't really want those people reading your books. You want actual people who read in your genre to read your books. Of course, it's difficult to get reviews. If you have to ask friends or family, that's fine. I don't promote my books even on my personal Facebook page unless I'm desperate and I really want to boost the sales a little bit, but that will kind of screw up your launch because it mixes the data, which you really want to keep clean. So I would shoot for like 100 actual readers of your genre that are willing to buy your book. If this is your first launch, if it's your first book, I wouldn't be afraid of doing a lot of free promotions and just trying to give away as many copies as you can. You can always raise the price and focus on ads later once you've figured some more stuff out. But anyway, 100 sales in the first week, or like 100 sales a day, would put you about in the top 1,000 on the Amazon store. Depending on how you picked your categories, you should be able to get a #1 bestseller tag when you launch. There are a lot of categories on Amazon. You can actually choose up to 10. So when you publish a book on KDP, it only allows you to choose 2 categories. But depending on the keywords that you choose, I didn't really talk about keywords in this video because I have other videos on that, but you have a bunch of slots for keywords, and you can actually add multiple keywords in each slot. I try to group them kind of in little subtopics. So one group might be like urban fantasy, paranormal, romance, and the other one might be werewolf, vampire, shifters, something like that. But there are also specific keywords that you can use to position yourself in certain Amazon categories. Amazon has its own system, so you can look up, I think in the workbook, there's a link to the place where you can find which keywords you need to use to get Amazon to put you in certain categories. But that system doesn't really work very well. So I ignore that, and just after you publish, you can click on help and click on contact and send Amazon a message and just say, these are the 10 categories. You're allowed up to 10 categories. Just say, please put my book in these categories, and they will do it for you. It used to be easier because on Amazon, it used to display the whole string for the category. So it would be like, I don't know, books, fiction, thriller, mystery, vampire, something like that. It'd be a full string, and you could just copy paste that whole thing. But Amazon now is only showing the last category, not the full string. So it can be tricky to, because I actually asked them recently to put me in these categories, and they said, well, you have to give us, the full string, but you can't go back and look that up on your Amazon page like you used to be. So it's a little harder. But anyway, it's worth doing. You can get into up to 10 categories. Depending on your categories, you don't want to get, like if you have a fiction book, you don't want to put it in a non-fiction category. And you don't want to pick categories that are completely irrelevant because it's weird. On the other hand, you do want to try to choose less competitive categories. You can go into any category, and you would do research where you look at all the other books that are similar to yours, and you'd see what categories they're in, and then you would look at that category page. It used to be 20 books per page. I think now it might be 50 books per page, but you want to go to the last book on the page and check their sales rank to see roughly how many copies you would need to sell to get, at least you want to be on that page, on the first page of your category. It's not a huge deal actually if you hit #1 bestseller, except you do get an orange tag. So if you pick a category where the first book doesn't have a great sales rank, and by that I mean, it's hard now to find categories that are not so competitive, but if you could find a category where the #1 position is like 10,000, that should be pretty easy to break. Like I said, 100 sales will put you about at 1,000 in the store. Very rough because things change all the time. It depends who else is doing promotions that day and who else is advertising, or the new launches that are coming out. So things are always changing. And that's also kind of shitty because if you're planning this huge launch and somebody else launches the same day and you're not able to get your #1 bestseller tag, that kind of sucks. On the other hand, side note, one effective strategy can be you can figure out what other best-selling authors are publishing around the same time that you plan to publish, and you can on purpose choose the same day. So traditional publishers usually publish their list of upcoming publications like 6 months or even a year in advance. So you could look for example, I can look for young adult books, young adult fantasy and science fiction books launching in October 2019. And I can find lists of those, and I can try to find a book that's pretty similar to mine, and I can choose to publish on the same day as that book, because if I push my book really hard and I know that that other book is going to get most of its sales the same day, there's a stronger chance that my book will stick in the also boughts of that book. So that can be a neat little effective strategy that you might want to think about. But going back to the bestseller list, it's not a huge deal to get that #1 bestseller tag, except that you can post on Facebook. When you launch, you don't really want to say, please buy my book and support me. You want to say, thanks everyone for your support. My book is now a #1 bestseller. And then you want to show like a screenshot of your orange tag, like, yay, celebrate, I got my best-selling tag. That's a much stronger social media post that you can share. So, but don't be heartbroken if you don't get it, because it depends on a lot of other factors. I do think it's fun to shoot for it and to try, to get it. And you may want to, you'll probably be refreshing your rank and checking your book and seeing if you can get up to that #1 spot. It doesn't ultimately mean very much, because you can't really say, like I see people say, I'm a #1 Amazon bestseller, but they're not. Like, immediately after launch, their rank plummets. And if people, they can see that claim, but they'll also see that you're in the thousands in the category. You're not a #1 bestseller anymore. And I mean, some readers don't really know so much. They don't know that it's super easy to get a #1 bestseller tag. And for credibility boosting, like if you write nonfiction, it's not the worst thing in the world to say somewhere in your bio that you're an Amazon bestseller. I think most people are savvy enough to know that's not a big deal, but it's better than nothing. And it is a little bit of social proof and positioning. There was actually a conversation on Facebook in the last couple of days about, you're not allowed to say #1 Amazon bestseller on your book cover. I don't think you're allowed to say it in your blurb or sales description either, although a lot of people still do. And one of the things that I think is effective is one of the things you can do in your description, because you should be using keywords and categories in your description so that there's text in your description. So in your author bio, in the book description, in the other reviews, you want to have those keywords in the text, because that will help your SEO, which is search engine optimization. Amazon is a content management system. So when people search for things, you'll have a better chance of showing up if you know what they're searching for and if you kind of match that a little bit. So one of the things that I've seen be effective is people will just keep a list of the categories that they were successful in. I think one of my books still has this. It's also a pain in the ass because, some of my books I haven't updated for a year, and I may be doing things that were fine that are now not okay. So I need to go back and fix things. But something like, when this book launched, it was #1 in urban fantasy, paranormal romance, werewolves, and #1 in science fiction, dystopian, survival apocalypse. That's kind of a way to stuff some extra keywords. You don't want to just like have random keyword strings. You want it to be readable and to make sense. But if you can also find a way to put the right information in there to hit those keywords, that can be beneficial. Otherwise, getting #1 Amazon bestseller is not that great. So let me talk quickly about the other bestseller lists. I've been on the USA Today bestseller list and the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, but with box sets. So the way box sets work is that a bunch of authors publish together. Generally, it's a full-length novel. So they all pitch in some advertising budget. You have like 20 novels all together with a really nice cover, and everybody advertises really hard or markets really hard with the goal of hitting the list. So with the USA Today bestselling author list, they accept everybody. I think you need roughly 10,000 copies, but at least 500 of those have to be on Kobo and iBooks or something like that. And it's not guaranteed because it depends on, what other books are launching that week. But the idea is you do a really long pre-order, because most, I'll talk again about pre-orders later, but most pre-orders on other sites that are not Amazon will count on the day of launch. So if you get like 500 or 1,000 iBook sales, when you launch the book, all those sales will take into effect and your rank will spike up. And I wanted to mention earlier, so I'm going to circle back, that the whole point of the ad stacking is to spike your rank and get more visibility. So you pay for advertising or ad stacking to sell a lot of copies in a short period of time. You sell 100 copies, and then you get a higher rank. That's very common. That's normal launch process for especially self-publishing authors. That has been for like a decade. But Amazon getting a little suspicious about what they call rank manipulation. So there are some people who it's a really gray area because there's all this stuff that works, and some of it's gray hat, some of it's white hat, but it works. It's not illegal. So there are the real legitimate authors who do it, and then there are what people will call the scammers or the cheaters or the illegitimate authors who are doing the same things, but the idea is that they have crappy books, so they're just doing it for money, which I don't necessarily think is true, because a lot of those cheater, spammy authors, yes, they do some things that are illegal, but they probably weren't illegal when they started. Amazon took action. For example, with Kindle Unlimited, there used to be a big thing with book stuffing. So with Kindle Unlimited, you get paid by the page read. So you could have a massive book. You could have 10 novels and just repackage your novels up into different order and then have 10 different box sets of massive content. And then when you sell those books for 99 cents, you could have a link in the front that takes you to the back, and you would get massive payouts with page reads, but then you'd also earn these Amazon bonuses. So Amazon was giving out its bonuses to people who were using these tactics, which were not good. So it was unfair to the common author because these, cheaters or spammers had all of this content. There's also a lot of controversy over stuff like ghostwriters, because there's people who, they do this as a business. They hire ghostwriters, or they work with teams, and they don't write the content. They're just the publisher or the business manager or whatever. They own all the assets. And then they do all this stuff to earn a whole bunch of money from Amazon. So Amazon has gradually tried to crack down. Because there was such an uproar about these tactics, Amazon started cracking down on things like rank manipulation, where people would just have a huge spike. Because there were sites like, I think it was Books Butterfly, that guaranteed a certain number of downloads. So if you have a free campaign and you pay Books Butterfly, they guarantee you'll have 5,000 downloads or 10,000 downloads, and nobody can guarantee downloads unless they're using something like a reader mill or a farm. So in some third world country, there's someone with like 50 devices and they're just downloading a ton of books. And that's obviously not great. It worked really well because you'd get all the downloads, and then you'd get in the top of the Amazon store, and then you'd have the visibility and you'd pick up real actual readers. Of course, that's not great. I don't even know if Books Butterfly is still around. I think they've changed their process, because I think they do have a pretty strong email list that they've built up. So maybe now they don't do that anymore. I don't want to say bad things about them if they probably updated, because this was a couple years ago. So you do want to be careful about anything that promises a certain number of results in book marketing. But that's also why book marketing is so scary, because most book marketers won't promise any results. And it's why I don't really do book marketing services, because unless I can guarantee the content of the book and I can make the cover and help you to write the blurb, then I can't really guarantee anything, because I could get a ton of visibility for your book and it wouldn't convert real readers if your offer isn't strong enough. But there are a lot of people who will take your money and give you a lot of promotion or visibility without taking note of the fact that your conversion may not actually work. So that's why with Guerrilla Publishing, I really focus on the basics of your offer and not the promotion and visibility stuff. But once you have a good offer, of course, you do need the visibility. So this is all the extra stuff that comes into play. But the thing is now, it was happening where Amazon is trying to stop the rank manipulation and stuff like the reader farms. So even if you got like a Bookbub, Amazon, like they have tools and robots to try to stop some of these bad tactics, or the bad actors at least. So there was controversy over like the legitimate authors were getting penalized, because if they got a Bookbub, or if they did a really good, like if they built a platform and they got 10,000 downloads, or a Bookbub is like 25,000 downloads sometimes, Amazon might flag their account or even shut down their account while it investigates. And you would have to, plea with Amazon and try to prove that you're not doing anything fishy. But in the meantime, they've completely sabotaged your launch and all the momentum. So that happened to a lot of people at the same time when Amazon was trying to clean up its act a little bit, and that's too bad. There are still some issues where if you do too well, Amazon might suppress your rank a little bit. There also used to be a thing where you could you could have a Kindle free promotion and you could get a lot of free downloads and then flip to the paid store, and your rank would shoot up and you'd be able to earn some good money from the paid store before your rank sank back down. So Amazon separated into a free store and a paid store. They're on different lists, and also they they will disappear your rank for a while. So almost a day, like when you switch from free to paid or back or vice versa, you will notice that your rank kind of disappears for a while. That's normal. It's because Amazon's kind of suppressing that effect. They don't want, that effect to be there. So the purpose of launching is really to sell a lot of copies quickly and to spike your rank and to get more visibility. But if you do too well, Amazon may accuse you of rank manipulation. Anyway, so it's complicated. It's not like with all this stuff, Amazon's going to do what's best for Amazon, and you have to do what's best for you. So you want to be careful, but you can't worry about what Amazon may or may not do to you if they accidentally think you're doing something that's more gray hat or black hat. So I was saying with box sets, there are some services and companies that will market to you the opportunity to be part of a box set with other best-selling authors and get your letters, earn your letters. I don't think there's anything, good or bad. I don't think I'm not going to condemn or champion either side of this debate. There are some people who feel like if you earn your letters in a box set, it's not valid. But there are a lot of people who don't. Especially, there's different stuff with fiction and nonfiction. I've been in a bunch of them. It can be good visibility. Like it makes sense. If you work with 20 other authors and you're really working very hard, you can get more visibility for your book. It's not probably going to be profitable for you, and that visibility may not convert into sales unless you have a great book in the box set, unless people are reading the box set and, people sign up to your email list or they buy the second book or their other books that you've written. So you kind of need a backlist. It is a decent way to build a platform. It is a decent way to learn something about marketing because you're going to be marketing with other authors. I don't personally like how some of the box sets are run because it's not necessarily about profit. It's just about hitting the list. So they may do a lot of things that don't make it's not actually good marketing. So you may be learning, you may be at a disadvantage because you'll learn some marketing tactics which don't really sell books. It's just to try to hit the box set. And I've seen someone asked me recently about one that was, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000 to join or something. And there's a really nice sales page and they sell it as this opportunity to get, become a USA Today bestselling author. But if it's a $5,000 entrance fee and if there's 20 authors, that's like $100,000 and you can hit the list with $10,000 or $20,000 of advertising spend. So that's just pure profit basically. And not necessarily, but the authors who are willing to pay to put their books in a box set, they probably they're doing that because they don't know enough marketing to do better. Which again, it can definitely work. I'm not saying it's a bad strategy. If you see an opportunity to be in a box set with other authors who write in your genre that have a platform or an audience, it's not a bad deal. I've been in several. I'm not against doing some more in the future. I've organized a couple because they do work pretty well. But also, just because you're a USA best-selling author doesn't mean you're going to sell more books. Just because you say that in the blurb, it's kind of a nice credibility boost. It's kind of nice to say in your author bio or whatever. I don't personally use mine. I think I'm waiting for me to hit I want to hit the list with a single title of my own books. again, it's not a moral judgment. It's just, I think I do say on some of my nonfiction stuff, I say I'm a Wall Street Journal bestselling author because it is a pretty significant credibility boost. But it's not directly going to help you sell more books. So I would be, if not wary, at least it's probably not the thing that you should invest the most of your time in. There are other things I think can work better. So the stuff that works really well is advertising. Advertising only works if you have a really good offer, but Amazon has its own content and advertising platform under KDP publishing under its platform. So when you publish your own book on Kindle, you will have access to AMS, which is its advertising platform. I think you can advertise the ebook or the print book. I would focus on the ebook. And the advantage is you're showing your book on Amazon when people are on Amazon searching for books. So it's really the perfect place to be advertising your book. And you can do a lot of things with targeting. So you can target a big list of 1,000 keywords. And you can use tools like KDP Rocket or KDP Publishers, it's called now, to research those keywords. What you kind of have to do with Amazon ads is test out different price points and different budgets and different keywords, and then see. Amazon ads does a good job of keeping track of, which keywords are you paying the most for, which keywords are people clicking on, and are those people buying the book or not. You need a lot of data, so you would need like 100 clicks to figure out whether or not your conversion is decent. If you get 100 clicks on your ad, that's the first thing. So the way advertising works is, if you're not getting any clicks on your ad, it's probably your book cover, or it may be your blurb. I'm going to say blurb again, although that's misleading. With Amazon ads, you really only can show a very tiny snippet. So it's really only the hook. It's like 1 or 2 sentences. And there's also some conditions about what you're allowed to say. I don't think you're allowed to put reviews. I don't think you're allowed to put Kindle Unlimited anymore, although there are still some things that work, even though they may be against the terms now. So you may want to experiment and see what you can get away with. It kind of depends on who's reviewing your account that day. But you can set up your ads with all these keywords. You can also let Amazon just target whoever they want based on their own, smart marketing. Or you can target specific products. So I can just click other books I want my book to show up with, which is really smart targeting, especially when you're launching and you're trying to build your also bots. I'm actually going to make a video on that stuff after this because I have a book launch that's not going well that I want to try to resurrect with some kind of brute force advertising. So like when you just want, my book is not getting visibility because Amazon hasn't learned yet who to market because I'm not selling enough copies. So I need to spend some money to brute force some sales and be very selective with the targeting to train Amazon about who to show the book to. So that's what I'm going to work on. It is difficult with Amazon because there are a lot of indie authors now. One of the advantages, though, is that you're really only up against other indie authors, because traditional published authors or people who are publishing with a small press, they don't even have access to their own advertising dashboard. And 90% of the other people who are self-publishing, they're not even going to bother with advertising. But that means that, like, on the one hand, like 90% of the competition is gone. On the other hand, the remaining 10%, they're pretty savvy about book marketing, except that, out of that 10%, most of them don't have a strong enough book. They don't have a strong enough blurb or cover or review. So if you've done all that stuff right, you're only competing against, a very select group of authors who are doing everything else right. At least you want to only be competing against those people. But of course, those are the people with really massive budgets and a huge backlist who are driving up the prices. And also with Amazon ads, Amazon started doing a thing this year where they have a recommended bid price. So they'll say, we recommend you bid at this price. They might say something like the average is 20 cents to 40 cents. We recommend you bid 50 cents or whatever. They seem to be like, they recommend higher bids, which forces all the new authors who don't know any better to bid high, which forces the price up for everybody, so that Amazon is making more money. There's also been some weird stuff this year where they've been hiding the also bots and just having like 2 rows of advertising instead, which is like purely pay to play, which is not good for anybody because it's long term. It's not good for Amazon to only show the books that people are paying to promote to its readers. It's not an indictment of quality, but it can be. I mean, Amazon wants to, Amazon wants to show the good books too. They want to show the traditionally published books, or the books that review well, that people are buying. They don't just want to show whoever's paying the most to advertise, because that's not good for Amazon. So I think the also bots won't fully go away. I think that's still going to be integral to their system, but they are putting a lot of stress on paid advertising as well. So it's not as easy to get the visibility that you used to be able to get. You probably are going to have to also do some advertising, but hopefully it won't need to be long term. Hopefully there are people, there are several good books on advertising on Facebook ads. Brian Meeks has one. There's several, I think Chris Fox has one as well. And there's one other one, I want to say it's Help My Facebook Ads Suck or something like that. Anyway, if you look for Facebook ads or Amazon ads, there are books on Amazon that walk you through it, but they're really, really detailed in the weeds, spreadsheets galore. I personally can't stand that stuff, which puts me at a big disadvantage, because there are people who will, there are services that will run your Facebook or your Amazon ads for you, but they're not very good unless you have a huge budget, because for most people, like, there's not enough, like, you can't even make ads profitable for you. So you're not going to be able to make enough extra money to be able to pay a good amount of money to a service, which means a lot of the services are just having like a budget service, and they don't do a very good job. You can do better by yourself. This has been the case for a while, except I know some guys who run Facebook ads who are really good at it, and they charge a lot of money, or they charge like 20% of your ad spend or something like that, because they, if they're good at it, they're going to charge more. And so it's not going to make sense for you to hire someone unless you're spending thousands of dollars on advertising, which is probably not what you want to start doing. You want to start off really small. Amazon ads specifically doesn't take your money very easily. So you kind of have to set, I think I set like $100 a day budget. And I hope it spends a few dollars a day, maybe $10 a day, but that depends on how much you're bidding for the keyword also. So if you set really high keyword budgets, and by high I mean like $1, but in certain, like if you're writing urban fantasy or romance, some of those authors have 20 books, so they're paying $5 per click or something, because they know that if they can get a reader to get the first book, their average lifetime value of that reader is like $25 or $50 or something. So if you only have one book out, or even if you only have a one series or a few books out, it's going to be difficult to make advertising profitable for you. But even so, it's a good idea to lose some money with advertising, not only to figure out advertising and not only to populate your also bots and to fix your organic visibility, but also to figure out the flaws in your funnel and figure out, why aren't readers buying my book? So I was saying earlier, on Amazon, if people are not clicking your ads, well, first, if your ads aren't spending at all, you don't have a high enough budget, or you don't have enough keywords, or you're not bidding enough per keyword. So your ads just aren't taking off. And there are people who say you need to have a lot of different ads, or you need to make lots of duplicates of your ads. I tend to just make an ad and let it run. I'll usually make like at least 3 different versions of the ad to test different hooks, which is a really good idea, because the other really good advantage of this stuff is that if I make like 5 different ads with 5 different hooks, I can see which one gets the most clicks, and then I know that that's the strongest hook. If I've done the same covers or whatever, it's the only difference is the hook, which is just that like 1 or 2 sentence description. So with your hook, that's either going to be, ideally, I say this in some other video, but what you want on the top of your Amazon page, you want your best content. So you need to do 3 things on the top of your Amazon page. You need to very quickly communicate to your reader what genre this book is in. So you need to have certain keyword or genre classifications to let readers know what kind of book this is, who it's for, what it's like, what genre it is, things like that. You also need to let them know that it's good. So you need to hit the quality with something like a short review or teaser. With reviews, I'll usually like look through my reviews and then take a very shortened, like 1 or 2 words. Like if somebody says, superb, this is a great book, that's good, but it's not good enough because that's just quality. And like I said, you also need to be specific about genre. So you need, like if a book says something like, this is Harry Potter meets the Hunger Games, that's great because that's very specific. It's a review, which is credibility. It's better if somebody else says it than if you say it because people don't really believe what you say. You want to be careful against, in your blurb on Amazon, you don't want to use a bunch of superlatives like exceptional, exciting, great, because if you are saying those things about your own book, nobody's going to believe them. But if you can put them in a review, then it might be okay. But your best reviews will be like, this book is great, and this is the genre, or these are the keywords, or whatever. So I confused that a little bit, but the 3 things I was mentioning was you need something that says this is good. So something about the quality, this is a good book. You need something about the genre or the keywords, and then you need something like a hook that captures their attention. So if you have a really strong, powerful hook, that can be on top. And what you'll see a lot of people do, I think Brian Cohen he teaches courses about writing your Amazon blurb, and I think the system that he teaches is something like having a bold, like 3 short phrases with periods after them that kind of summarize all the selling features of your book. So like battling kingdoms, an ancient prophecy, one orphaned survivor to rule the kingdom, something like that, like a very short snippet that summarizes the core conflict of your book. That's not actually a great hook. Ideally, you'd want something better, but if you don't have one, because it's very difficult to get a hook, especially writing your own blurb is really challenging. There's also companies that will write a blurb for you with mixed results. I think it's difficult to write your own blurb, so by all means, if you can afford it, I'd just try to hire someone else even to help you out. I usually have trouble with my blurbs until, months after I publish, and I finally figure out how to communicate the core value or benefits of my book into a powerful blurb. But what I was saying is you kind of want to test that stuff out because it's difficult to get right. You can test it out with ads and see which ad is getting the most clicks, and then you can take that blurb, that hook, and you can put it at the top of your Amazon page because now you know that it converts well. So that's what you want to be using. So that's kind of an effective strategy for AMS ads. Facebook ads are a little different because they will take your money. So on the one hand, it's not just your book cover, and actually just putting your book cover doesn't really perform very well on ads or on social media because they prefer the square or the rectangular art, and they don't want a lot of text in that image. So usually like the text you want to, you can use free stock photos, or you can use your book cover art without the text, and maybe something like free today, 99-cent deal, free in Kindle Unlimited, or a really strong hook, but just like a couple words, not a lot of text. So, and you want to test out different images because it will make a big difference. You can also do some different things with Facebook ads. You can choose like what's on the top and what's in the call to action and what's on the button that goes somewhere. So you have more choices, which means you can test out different things. And the danger is that Facebook ads will definitely take your money really quickly. So it's easy to spend a lot of money quickly on Facebook ads, and you want to make sure that they're profitable. So you want to be testing things out. You want to start kind of small. You can start with like $1 a day. And the nice thing about Facebook ads is that it is scalable because everybody is on Facebook. So if you get your targeting right, and if you get your ad copy right, and you figure out that the ads are converting, you also probably want to, like, same thing with the AMS ads. Once you have a successful Facebook ad, you want to make sure your actual Amazon page matches the ad. So whether it's the same art or the same sales copy or something, you want to make sure that they don't get confused if they click on it. and they don't buy because your book actually looks different from what they were promised. So it's something to keep in mind. But you do want to experiment a lot. Start with a low bid and a low budget. But if it's working, you can start spending more and more money, and it can be very profitable. So a lot of the authors I know who do really well, they spend a lot. They spend like 20% of their revenue on ad spend. So maybe they're making $25K a month with book sales, and they spend $5,000 or $10,000 on advertising. Actually, like if you can even break even, that's great, because if you can break even, that means you're getting visibility for free and building your platform for free and getting more readers for free, especially if you have a series or if you have more books. So breaking even is the first goal. If you can't break even with advertising, then your targeting is not right, or your blurb or your cover isn't strong enough yet, or maybe you don't have enough reviews. But as long as, like, if the cover and the blurb is really tight, and as long as you have 10 plus reviews, I would say it's not a huge deal. Although I think it is, once you get up to like 100 reviews, of course, that's a lot easier for readers. Even if the blurb and cover doesn't look amazing, once they're on your Amazon page, there's a greater chance they'll stick around and be like, oh, well, this has 100 reviews. Maybe I'll check it out. Maybe I'll buy it. So it is, it's more useful to have more reviews, but you can do advertising even with less. I've never really scaled up with ads because I've never really finished a fiction series, and because a lot of my nonfiction books I give away for free, or I don't focus on the profit. One of the things I'm going to start doing, I'm working on a new course, which is a 21-day best-selling author platform. It's going to be a lot more about the business stuff of like how to launch a nonfiction book, to position yourself as an expert in order to become a speaker or sell services or sell courses or other things. So kind of the upsell stuff. And there's a lot of opportunity there to sell a book and break even on the book, which means you're advertising for free, and then also sell a lot of the other things. So I'm really excited about that stuff. I know enough about advertising to know I can get it to work for me, but I don't have the right content yet. So I'm focusing on the content, and I'm using organic strategies like blogging in the meantime. But the advantage of advertising is I talk a lot about building your own platform, building your own email list, but advertising is really the shortcut. So if you can get it to work for you, you don't really need an author website or an email list. You'll still be marketing to cold traffic, which, like I said, isn't ideal. It's really valuable to have your own fan base that grows over time. So you really want to be investing in that, because also things could change all the time. So maybe advertising works for you right now, but then it doesn't in 3 months or in 6 months. And you haven't built your platform, so you're kind of screwed. I've seen happen to a lot of friends of mine where, they, into the 2018, every 6 months there's huge Amazon changes and everything gets flipped. But people were making like 50 grand a month, and then now they're back down to 5 grand a month. So if you've quit your job to write books and now you can't, like those strategies you were using aren't working anymore, that can be really frustrating. You do want to be flexible. The nice thing is once you have the content, you can always rebrand or figure new things out or find new strategies, as long as you're paying attention and you're staying updated and informed about what's going on in the publishing market. So I'm going to talk about blog tours and podcasts. I'll start with podcasts. Podcasts are better for nonfiction stuff. There are some fiction podcasts that interview fiction books. I don't think that's where the readers are. And I think a lot of them are writer specific. I don't know of any podcasts that are genre specific for fiction. There should probably be some, but then the issue with this stuff is that, like, because I've thought about maybe making a podcast for young adult fiction and featuring young adult fiction authors. The problem with that is that you would have to vet all the submissions, which would be a full-time job that you're not getting paid for. So if I had that, I'd get thousands of submissions. I'd have to read all the books, at least enough to know whether or not they're good enough that I want to feature them to my audience. And if a podcast is basically free content. So if I'm investing all this time in free content, it'd be really difficult to make it profitable and worth my time. So with marketing, like, you want to be writing your books. You want to do what's easy and that doesn't take all your time, because you want to be writing. You don't want to spend all your time marketing. So you want to be wary of things that seem like a good idea but aren't really directly going to influence sales. So that's why I think, a podcast isn't a great idea for fiction, except that, if I already know a lot of young adult authors. If I started a podcast, one of my ideas for a podcast actually, which I think is kind of brilliant, which would be just my type. So I would just have famous best-selling young adult authors record like a 20-minute session of them typing. So it would just be the sounds of them typing with the background music of whatever they like to listen to, with some information about their book. So that would be a really easy thing to set up where they could submit their stuff. I wouldn't have to interview them or anything. It'd be mostly like a novelty, which you also have to be careful about. I like novelty stuff done well. If you have something like a gimmick, it can go viral. You can get a ton of shares. But I've gotten millions of views for stuff that doesn't translate into sales, into revenue. So on the one hand, it didn't take very much time to set up, so that's fine. But you don't want to invest a lot of time getting a lot of visibility when you end up running this massive thing for free and you're not getting paid for it. So I'd be skeptical about those kind of things, or like chasing the gimmicks. Although I haven't really mentioned, you do want to be looking for tie-ins, for like media tie-ins or current event tie-ins. So if you find a way to position your book and tie into something that's trending, something that people are searching for, like I said about, when other people have a new book coming out, you should target that new book, because it's new and people are going to be buying and searching for that new book. So you want to be looking for things like that. Or in the young adult space, there are big events that people are searching for and talking about. So if I use those keywords or hashtags, if I talk about the things that my audience is talking about, then they will find me. They will like me because people like us, or something like that, where you just want to be talking about things that you like, and your audience will find you because they're also talking about the same things. That's not really direct to sales, but you might start building a platform that way. They may check out your email list or your opt-in offer and start getting to know you. Part of a lot of this stuff is just showing up consistently over time with a certain kind of brand, talking about a certain kind of thing. So I got a bit off track, and I think I had about 45 more minutes recorded that my computer has eaten. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit and then try to wrap up this video talking about the final 3 points. So I think where I got cut off, I was talking about what I do with Facebook. And I actually have another video I'll share soon that has the whole system that I use for ARC copies and beta readers and stuff. I have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. Pages don't get as much organic visibility. They get very, very little actually. Out of my 10,000 people, if I post like a new release, go buy my book, I might get 100 people to see it. Even if I post like a video, maybe 100 or less. Mostly because Facebook doesn't want you to send traffic outside of their platform. They'd rather keep you on Facebook with engaging content. So they would prefer that you have good content that people like to share. So if I post a meme, for example, I might reach those 10,000 people, but it's not converting to anything. They're liking my page. They might be sharing me, so I'm getting more visibility, but they're not finding my book. So one thing that you can do is post a meme, and then in the picture say something like the link to my new book is in the comments, and hope that people read the comments to find the link. But most people don't do that on Facebook. People will just like and comment and share on the image and not on the actual link. So it's kind of difficult to use a page to get organic visibility. However, you need a page to do the advertising, which can be really useful. So you also kind of need a group, because groups get more engagement. So I have a group set up for my private ARC list. That's where I post ARC books and things like that. So the only thing I'll say about Facebook and social media in general is that there's a thing called what Gary Vaynerchuk calls native content. So on different platforms, on Twitter or Facebook, you can't be using the same messages. You have to use the kind of content that performs well on that particular place. So when people ask stuff like, what's the benefit of Twitter? What's the benefit of Facebook? I can't sell any of my books. What's the point? It's useless. They're trying to sell books on those platforms, and those platforms are not set up for book sales. What those platforms are good for is building relationships with people through the shared appreciation of great content. So when I post things on Facebook, I still want them on my email list. I still want them to follow me on Amazon. There needs to be another place where I can tell them to go buy the book and get them to take action. But what Facebook is really good for is long-term communal building through shared sympathy, where you like things and you hate things, and you kind of like, just by showing up and sharing good content over a long period of time, people can kind of get a sense of who you are and what you stand for. That's what social media is really good for. Twitter is pretty good specifically for cashing in on hashtags or current events, but you have to be really careful, and Twitter can be kind of a troll fest. I haven't really mentioned Goodreads, and I don't know if I really will in this video, except I think I talked about Goodreads giveaways earlier. Goodreads is a dangerous place because it's set up for readers specifically. It's a great place to do research and data. I don't necessarily think it's where you should be hanging out as an author. It's more of a reader platform. And you don't have to be using these platforms all the time or being really engaged. It is a little bit of a way. If you enjoy Facebook or Twitter, that's a good way to communicate with fans. But if you don't and you hate it, that's fine if you want to stay off of it. However, I would say, like, if you're trying to build a platform, people will take into consideration your metrics. So whether you're trying to partner with someone or get a publishing deal, or even just attract new followers, if they look at your Twitter and Facebook and they see that you have like less than 500 or 1,000 followers, they may assume that you're not a serious professional writer. So it can be advantageous to at least get some decent numbers up in the beginning, which you can do with something like a King Sumo giveaway to get follows, which doesn't mean that those people following you actually care about you or your books, but at least it's a start to try to engage and get new followers. So let me move down here to pre-orders and bonuses. As of right now in 2019, Amazon seems to be valuing pre-orders, and they work a little differently. What used to be the case is it's easier to sell a lot of copies over a long period of time than to try to squeeze them into your launch week. So what some people would do, if they try to hit the box sets or the list or whatever, is they would have a long pre-order period where they could slowly get a bunch of pre-orders so that they would all count and take effect during launch week and spike your rank up really high. Amazon actually seems to depress, on the one hand, Amazon depresses pre-orders. So when they purchase your book on a pre-order, it automatically pushes your rank up a little bit. So you don't get that big spike on release day, partly because Amazon's trying to limit that, extra power of that big pre-order launch. However, it is easier to get more copies slow term by dripping out lots of little pieces of bonus content like early reviews or beta reviews or excerpts from your book or content art or, work in progress stuff. You can be communicating things to your audience to build up the hype and the demand for your book when it releases. And each time you communicate with your audience, it would be useful to have a link to a book on pre-order rather than trying to get them all to buy, right when you launch. So it's a little bit easier. And I think even though Amazon is kind of depressing that spike in sales rank, they are still giving a lot of power to pre-orders, especially if you can get a lot. And by a lot, I mean a few hundred, but ideally like 1,000 plus would put you in a really strong position, because that will not only help you pre-populate your also bots and give Amazon some data about who's buying your book, but it'll also help your book stick a little bit on launch. So the people who tend to, go out of the gate, they have a launch and they have a bunch of pre-orders already, 500 to 1,000 pre-orders or something, their book tends to stick and perform really well, especially the first month or two. My biggest book launch a couple years ago, I had, I think, 1,500 pre-orders or something. That book did really well. It made a lot of money. And it was partly because I had a Bookbub on book one, and then I had a link to the book two on pre-order. And then, all those pre-orders really helped to boost the book. So it does work really well. It's an option. One of the things that I see that I like some of my friends doing is I'll do a really small advertising campaign for like $5 or $10 a day over like a 3-month pre-order period. So you're never going to really sell pre-orders as well. The conversion is going to be low because you don't have the reviews or the social proof. So it's harder to make your money back with a pre-order. However, slow playing it, it's kind of a very easy passive way to launch a book. If you kind of slow play it $5 or $10 a day with ads to drive traffic to a book that's on pre-order, it's very hands-off and low-key, but it can work really well. The other thing that can work really well is by adding pre-order bonuses. And this gets a little bit tricky, so I'm going to kind of talk about the controversy. This is really common, especially nonfiction stuff. I'm sure you've seen people you follow who have a big platform who launch a book, and they say, if you pre-order my book on Amazon, you will earn all these bonuses. And sometimes they'll do stuff like, if you buy 10 paperback copies, or if you buy 100 paperback copies, they'll have different level tiers of rewards and bonuses, similar to what you would get on Kickstarter. It can work really well if you already have a platform, or even just to kind of, as a better offer, you can do something to incentivize pre-order purchases. But that's where it gets really tricky, because you're not allowed, by Amazon's terms and services, you're not allowed to incentivize purchases. So you can't, pay people to buy your book, which is kind of what it means if you're offering them extra bonuses. And the distinction is that your book itself has to be worth the value that they would pay for it, so that when they're paying for your book, they're buying it because the book is good and they're getting the book. That's what they're paying for. They're not paying for the extra bonuses. It's not illegal to offer pre-order bonuses, but it can be a little bit of a gray area. So for example, one of the projects I was in, I think last year, was Write and Grow Rich. It was organized by somebody else. It was one of those box sets where I submitted a chapter, but I wasn't really in charge of all of the organization. And so some of the people involved in that box set were disliked by other people in the indie author community, who are kind of the whistleblowers on the scammers. So what happened is our box set got a lot of really bad press, and a lot of people went to Amazon and complained because they thought what we were doing was illegal and immoral, because we were basically offering pre-orders for people to buy. We were offering bonuses. If you buy the pre-order, then you'll get all of these other courses and bonuses and whatnot. And it was a gray enough area that Amazon removed the book from the store until it was investigated. So because we got all that bad press, Amazon took action against us, which kind of screwed up our launch. But then Amazon investigated, and we changed a few of the things. Like, we did the same thing, but we changed some of the terminology we used on the Amazon page to make sure we weren't breaking the terms, and Amazon reinstated us back to Amazon. We did hit the Wall Street Journal and the USA Today bestseller list. So offering pre-orders for bonuses is not against Amazon's terms, but depending on how you do it, you want to be a little bit careful, because self-publishing is a very small community. This was a set aimed at writers, and a lot of the self-publishing community and the writers, the indie authors, they're very skeptical of, because there's so many predatory author services and vanity presses and stuff. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. So I think people are rightfully on guard against scams and stuff. I personally think I wrote like a big blog defense, because, as I mentioned, even though it was a gray area, we didn't do anything that was against terms. The assumption was that our entire box set was fluff, and that there was nothing of any substantial value in the book itself. And therefore, when people were buying the box set, they were only buying the bonuses, not the actual content. And therefore, it was rank manipulation by incentivizing purchases. And that was an assumption, because nobody had actually read the book yet, because it wasn't out yet. It was on pre-order. So anyway, I bring this stuff up just to let you know of some of the complications, but setting up pre-order bonuses is pretty basic content. It's a standard process. Amazon may make it completely illegal in the future. It's not currently against the terms or rules, but it is something to be a little bit cautious of, just to kind of know, the pros and cons. In most cases, this isn't going to be an issue for you. Most readers won't care, and it's not going to get you in trouble with Amazon unless someone has an axe to grind and they come after you about it. I've seen this work okay even with fiction. You could have something like a bonus scene or a deleted scene, or like extra chapters. There's actually a new set of rules. I don't know if I've mentioned in recent videos. Amazon has changed its back matter, so you can now have no more than 10% of the back matter content. So after you put the end of your book, you can't have more than 10% extra as bonus content. And one of the ways around it is just not to put the end in your book. You can say like to be continued or to use other terminology because they have bots that are reading through and checking for that stuff. There's a lot of things where Amazon's trying to clean up his act, but it can't police millions of books. So they try to set up robots and systems to kind of go through and keep people in order. But you can have, it is a good idea to have a little bit of bonus content, like a bonus, like 1 or 2 chapters from the next book that they can go and buy. But you can also do it for fiction where you have, deleted scenes or character art or whatever else you think would be interesting to your readers to drive more pre-orders. So now I'm going to talk about author websites and blogging. This is one of the things that I've really focused on, mostly because, I didn't have a lot of content. I knew I wanted to do this writing thing long term. So I was focused on building up my own platform. And that generally means blogging, which is writing articles to attract content through SEO. When people search for things on Google, your blog will come up. And there's some really cool things that you can do if you have some site authority, which means Google recognizes that your site has some credibility and authenticity. Your links will be a little bit more powerful. So you can do something, for example, like write an article about the top 10 mermaid fantasy romances for teens. I've got several pieces of content like that. And then you can include a link in that to your Amazon book, which should push your book up in the Amazon rankings as well when you search for something like, best mermaid books. So having strong backlinks to your books on Amazon from a popular blog can help, which is also why I think I mentioned earlier with blog tours, I don't really recommend them unless you're getting a lot of valuable links to your website or to your book. It does make a lot of sense to do one of my sites is a joint author site, which I just set up so that a lot of different authors can post content together, because the more content, the more relevant content, the more traffic that we'll be getting. So that site, it's been pretty hands-off for a couple of years, and it gets quite a bit of traffic, something like 500 visitors a day. So out of those 500 visitors, I may, if I have a pop-up or a bar on the top of the page or something, then I may get 20 people a day to sign up to my email list and go through my autoresponder series, and then I can try to sell them on other books or build a relationship or try to turn them into fans. So it can work. It's not as direct and deliberate as advertising, which is why a lot of authors are skeptical about blogging because they don't know what to write about, or they think it's, a waste of time or a pain in the ass. It can work really well, especially because for most fiction genres or subgenres, nobody's really doing it well enough. So as I mentioned, I have a whole bunch of content centered around best books for teens. So I have like best pirate books for teens and best Space Odyssey with Dragon book for teens, because that's some of the stuff that people are looking for. And I know that because I've done keyword research to find out what my audience is looking for. And I've used those keywords in my blog posts. I've created the right kind of content to show up for what people are searching for. And because nobody else is really doing that stuff for fiction, I'm able to get a lot of the traffic. A lot of those posts are on the first page of Google, and on their own, like any one of them wouldn't be a big deal. But because I've got, probably like 50 of them now, that gets quite a bit of traffic. And this isn't even stuff you have to do for yourself. I have a virtual assistant in the Philippines who has a master's in English, and she's amazing. She helps me to put together a lot of this stuff. It's mostly just, research and content organization. You can find someone on Fiverr.com even who could probably help you to create this kind of content. And it's also not stuff that you have to do all the time. It's not something like you have to always be blogging all the time. I recommend you have 5 or 10 good, strong posts. When you start your blog, you should set up your blog. You should write 5 or 10 evergreen content posts, because those are what you're going to use to build traffic. So you can send those out to your email subscribers. When they sign up to your email list, you can have this free autoresponder series, and you can be suggesting these articles that you've made. And they can be, some of them will be like snapshots of your life. They might be travel memoirs, but they might be like, here's other mermaid fiction I recommend. One of my most popular ones is How Do Mermaids Have Sex? Because in my mermaid novel, I talk a lot about that subject. It's not an erotica, but it is something I found that a lot of people search for. So I get a lot of traffic just for that particular keyword, which is kind of weird, but the people who are searching for those things may be interested in my mermaid romance. So the advantage of having an author website or blogging is it gives you more long-term control. So rather than paying to access someone else's platform, it's something that grows over time. It might take a couple years for your website to start getting traffic. You can do things like reach out to other bloggers in your genre or field, try to get guest posts or backlinks, try to do like shared content or blog tours. A lot of this stuff, there are people who organize things, but it's never as effective if you were the person who organizes it for yourself. The problem is you really need to have, you can't be asking for favors. You need to be the one who's suggesting a really strong idea and communicating the benefits. And unfortunately, a lot of authors, they don't understand the benefits of blogging or author websites, so they're not really interested in doing anything that's difficult or getting involved in things where they don't understand why, how is this going to be beneficial? And also, unfortunately, a lot of the people who do organize some of these events, some of these big, blog tour events, they're not set up in a way that brings enough benefits for the authors to really see the advantages of participating. Another advantage of having your own author website, though, is that you can retarget the traffic. So you can put a Facebook pixel in your author website so that you can retarget the traffic on Facebook with Facebook ads. So for example, like I mentioned, I get probably 500 visitors a day. That's something like 15,000 people a month on my website who are probably interested in the topics I write about, which are mostly young adult, sci-fi, and fantasy. So I can show those people on Facebook an advertisement for my perma-free book or my free opt-in offer or whatever, and try to get them on my email list. I could also target them with a new book launch and straight to advertisements or whatever. That's a pretty good audience because I know they've probably been to my website because they've been searching for the right topics, and that's why they've shown up, which is why it's important to blog about the right topics. I do have a smaller side course that's Reach Your Readers that goes all about blogging and author website I set up a couple years ago, and I have tried to do something more recently. One of the common frustrations with authors' websites is that it's difficult to set them up if you don't know coding. It's difficult to set them up and make them look good. And so what you don't want to do is waste a lot of time or money or effort into building an author website, especially if you're not really getting any traffic or you only have one book. It's not the first thing that you should focus on. And unfortunately, because it's difficult to do web design if you're not a designer, most author websites are dysfunctional and pretty ugly, which is a problem. And I've always said in the past, the most important thing is just to have a clear, functional author website. So I have a list, if you Google like best WordPress sites for authors, I have a list of like 100 different WordPress themes. I recommend WordPress as a blogging solution. It's not as simple or easy as some other ones that people tend to like. So if you find something else that works for you, if you find like a drag or drop system that works for you, that's fine. It's better to have something than nothing, probably. But I like WordPress because it is simpler and because you can change and update it. So later, if you want to just completely revamp it and redesign it, it's easier to do and it will keep all of your content. This is something I've been going through recently because a lot of my blog posts, as I had recommended, I kept a really simple, basic, white WordPress site because I said that the best thing, the best looking thing on your website should be your book cover. You want your book cover to stand out. And the problem what a lot of people do is they have lots of crappy graphics and a really crappy header. So even if their book cover is decent, everything else just detracts and looks unprofessional and kills trust and credibility. People will land on your site. If it loads slowly, if they can't find their way around, if they don't know what to do or what to click on, they'll leave really quickly. So on the one hand, you need to organize your site in a way that makes it clear who the site is for. So you need like a tagline up on top or a header that says like author name and then a tagline like urban fantasy with witches or something pretty specific for people who like magic and adventure. You need some keywords and you need some content in the homepage or right on top that lets readers know they're in the right place. And that's just content stuff. So that's just organization. So there's a whole system of how I recommend laying out an author website. But more recently, I've really been focused on the branding of an author platform, which means, for example, rather than trying to communicate in words what your site is all about and what you have to offer, you can communicate all that stuff in a picture really easily. So I could have a really beautiful picture as a header of a witch and a dragon and whatever. People can see the art, and not only will they immediately know what genre it is, but it will also feel good because it's beautiful art, and they will feel trust, or like you can affect certain emotions in people with art in a way that you can't really do with words. So even before they start reading, just by the design or the art you have on your homepage, you can already put them in the frame of mind to let them know what you write and to get them to feel the feelings that you hope your fiction will evoke. The problem with those over-designed websites is they're slower to load. So it's a disadvantage. It may look awesome, but if you lose traffic, like if because Google will penalize you if your site is too slow to load or if people don't stick around long enough. So you kind of have to you want your site to be as fast as possible. So in my redesign, I've made a really cool, beautiful looking site, but now it loads too quickly, and that's not great either. So I'm trying to find a balance. I've recently been using DV WordPress, which is kind of a drag and drop WordPress theme, which allows you to kind of do everything. So I'm pretty excited about how I've been able to make my website look. And I had started a project because with DV, the other thing I can do is I can make and save templates. So other people could buy DV as a theme and then share my template. So I could make a specific like homepage, landing page, or blog template for every different genre with different fonts and art and stuff that you could use to just set up your blog and website quickly. I do think there's a need for a better author blogging solution. I've seen several of them come out over the last few years. None of them have been good enough at the price point. I've seen some come out for free. I've seen some come out for like $500 a year. You probably need a website anyway. So if it seems like it's easy for you, then go for it. I don't know when I will finish mine, but I'm excited about eventually finishing my project because I do think it will be a pretty good solution. But in the meantime, I recommend just starting with a basic WordPress site and getting some content up. I mentioned Reach Your Readers, which I'll link to somewhere, which has a pretty robust system for researching what you should blog about and getting up those initial blog posts, recommendations for what to write about and how often to blog. There's a lot of really good content in that course, so I'll send a link to it somewhere. Finally, the next book. So this is a lot of work, and if you've only got one book out, you want to kind of get all this stuff set up, but this is also all probably a little bit of overkill. So don't worry too much if you don't get everything right the first time. Definitely get the first book out so you can start to fail and learn, because it may take a while to figure out all the details. I do recommend investing in long-term organic strategies like blogging and building up your own author website, partly because things will always change and you want to make sure you're building something that lasts. You want to build your brick, what's the metaphor? Your house on the rock instead of your house on the sand or something like that, because Amazon's always going to change. Google will always change. You want to find a way to encourage your readers to follow you directly on multiple different platforms, so you always have a way of reaching your readers if everything gets torn out from under you, which tends to happen. So you want to be building this stuff while also recognizing that it can all be taken away, and that's okay. There are changes in the industry. You just kind of want to protect yourself as much as possible. What you don't want to do is rely on whatever tactics might be working right now. Like if you can get advertising to work right now, that's great. I also think you can and should be doing both. You should be doing advertising and you should be doing blogging. When I say blogging, I mean, start off with 5 or 10 posts. You can write a 500-word post in a day. So you can write 5 or 10 in a month and then just one update every month or so. I recommend probably 2 or 3 because you'll probably want something like an excerpt of what you're writing paired with this is my writing process, or this is a picture of me writing the book with my cat and my coffee. A little bit of like endearment, life sharing stuff. And if you just alternate those as content that you can share with your email list, then you don't need to worry about what to write about, because you're already developing the content. So as a content production strategy, just getting in the habit of learning a few of the types of posts or content that you should be focusing on. The idea with all this stuff is to force enough downloads or sales to give Amazon enough data. So I kind of touched on that earlier, but with your first book launch, it's probably going to be difficult to be profitable. And I kind of hate saying this, because there's all these other people out there who will say, I will help you launch and sell 10,000 copies or 100,000 copies or get on Oprah or whatever. And that's a lot more motivational. So it's inspiring to authors to think about those big numbers. And every author wants to sell thousands of copies, but the hard truth is the majority of authors don't sell more than 100 copies. And I would rather have you to be prepared and a little bit cautious, or maybe more realistic. I don't want to pop your balloons or whatever, but what I see happening is a lot of people expect thousands of copies, and then when they only sell 100 copies, they are devastated and they feel like huge failures, when actually selling 100 copies is fine. It's a good first launch. I think your first launch should be about learning and education. All of this stuff is difficult to figure out the first time, and so even if you're just learning and being comfortable, often what you have to do is sit with the discomfort. So all this stuff is uncomfortable. It may feel challenging for you. Just sitting with the uncomfortableness and doing it anyway until you get to the point where it's a little less challenging, so that by your third or fourth launch it's a lot easier. Eventually, by your 10th book or whatever, you'll be an old pro, and this stuff all gets a lot easier. And I'm not necessarily saying that you need 10 books, because I know people with one book. Well, there are very few people I know with one book that are doing okay, but I know people with a series of 3 or 4 books that are doing pretty good. So you don't necessarily need to be cranking out content, although it does definitely help to have more content. But you should be thinking about not being a one-hit wonder. You should be thinking about, okay, I want this book to sell, but I'm going to be consistently learning. So maybe every 6 months, think about, how can I relaunch that book and make it better? What did I screw up on the first book launch? Also, make sure to remind yourself to reward yourself when you've launched your book. Even if you get 10 sales or 100 sales, or even if you get 0 sales and you've just finished the project, you should be celebrating, because this is all difficult stuff to do. I do have some other books which you can find. A lot of these I've made free, but you've probably noticed in the last couple of videos, this is a ton of information. It's difficult to get through it all. I am making another little video series of a recent book launch that I did, which actually wasn't very successful. So I'll talk about the problem solving and what I did with a failed launch to turn it around and try to get back, into the ranks. I think that video series will be useful. I have a whole video on just how to format and the design and the upload process, and put the books up on Kindle. And then I have some walkthroughs of advertising and stuff. I know that it's difficult to learn all of this stuff just from videos or reading. You kind of have to see how it's actually done. So in a couple of days, I will invite you to join my Guerrilla Publishing membership program, which allows you to have a little more direct access to me and also get some personal feedback on your own book or website or blurb or whatever. And also the main value of the course is that there are just tons of videos that go through every different aspect of this. So if this feels overwhelming, there is that option. I also have a lot of shorter bonus courses that will go through any one of these particular subjects in more detail if you need just a little bit of boost or assistance with that. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.